Good afternoon, and welcome to our series, MasterMinds, Lessons in Leadership. I am joined by my co-host, Peter Linneman, where we discuss the intersection of strategy and leadership, which we feel is at the vortex of what makes great companies great. And we are extraordinarily pleased and honored to have Jim Connor with us. Jim is a client and a friend, and done a wonderful job with Duke Realty, where he is chairman and CEO. And Jim, with that, maybe I'll just ask you to tell the audience a little bit about Duke and anything else you'd like to cover.
Sure. Thanks, Bill. I'm happy to. And it's great to be with both of you. I consider you both great friends, but also people in this industry that I admire. So I'm happy to participate and look forward to having a little bit of fun here this afternoon. I'll keep it very simple and high level. Duke Realty, we're about a $20 billion real estate investment trust. We are focused exclusively on the industrial, the logistics sector. That hasn't always been the case, but it has for about the last 4 years. We develop, we acquire property in the top 20 markets around the United States. We manage our own portfolio. We grow primarily through new development, in all of our markets. Although, as I said, we do acquire. So our portfolio sitting here today is about 175 million square feet, a little over $20 billion enterprise value. And we have been enjoying a great run of late, even with the recession and the pandemic. So with that, I'll turn it back to you guys.
Well, I can't tell you how disappointed I am. Bill, you told me that this was with the leader of Duke, so I thought Coach K was going to be on telling us about his retirement at the end of this year.
Yeah, Jim's starting, and Coach K is going to come on right after that, Peter.
I see. So this is not Duke basketball. That's a different.
I get that question a lot, and I like to tell people that the power company and the university are just small subsidiaries of ours.
There you go. I like that.
Industrial
non-for-profit entities, right?
I like that.
No.
So, Jim, you referred to the extraordinary run, the extraordinary strength that the industrial/logistics warehouse has had up to and through this very moment. How has that somewhat surprising strength through the pandemic, and so how does that fit into formulating, implementing your strategy over the last year and as you look forward?
Well, I'll give you just a few seconds of history. You both remember when this company was a diversified company. We owned office, we owned healthcare, we owned retail, we did apartments, we did a lot of things. And coming out of the great financial recession, we committed to rebuild this company, simplify our business model, ultimately focusing on exclusively logistics sector, and rebuilding our balance sheet, getting out of non-profitable businesses, reducing our land holdings, deleveraging the company substantially. And I would tell you, going into last 2020, pre-pandemic, we had told our board consistently, we have rebuilt this company, repositioned this company to withstand the next recession. Our overall leverage levels were well under 30%. Great credit tenant profile. Our development pipeline was very, very well leased. So we had a very low risk out there in the marketplace. And we said there will be another downturn, and we're positioned to survive it. So I would tell you, we think we've proven ourselves correct in that, in a global pandemic and a recession, the company has outperformed. I mean, we had total shareholder return of about 18.5% last year. I would tell you most of our strategy was staying the course. We made some minor adjustments early on. Like everybody, we didn't know what the full impact of this was going to be. We shut down land acquisitions. We shut down building acquisitions. We told our people to focus exclusively on our development pipeline. Those are buildings that we had started that were either unleased, speculative buildings, or build-to-suit or pre-leased buildings. And we said, look, we've made commitments. This is where we need to focus our attention, our resources, our capital, and deliver on these projects. And Thank goodness we did, because we kept a lot of our customers satisfied. Those are facilities that are very much in need for them. And we've had great financial success once we developed those spec buildings. So, we thought that was really, really very prudent. The other side of what we did was focus on our portfolio and our existing tenants. Not everybody has the balance sheet of Walmart and Amazon and Home Depot, who are some of our biggest tenants. So we went in, we negotiated about 100 rent deferral agreements out of our roughly 500 and let's call it 75 tenants around the country. And I give all the credit to our local teams who rolled up their sleeves with our tenants to figure out what they needed, what they could afford, what time period they needed help over. And the end result was we collected 99.99% of our rents last year under these deferral agreements. So it was a really successful process for us. Coming out of it in the second half of the year, we ramped back up in development, in land acquisition, and finished the year very strong. We beat our full year projection on every metric, and yet we didn't do any development for roughly the middle half of the year. So, it was a great start to the year and a great finish to the year. The end result was, a really strong performance by the team, and I think our stock price and our shareholders rewarded us for that.
So, Jim, when did you become CEO?
I became CEO in 2016, and I became chairman in 2017.
Okay. So you figure 4 or 5 years. So this is all the result of, obviously, enlightened leadership.
Well, I'll share with you this story, and you've both been around, a lot of successful people. When I first became CEO, people asked me, what was I going to change and what was I going to do? And, it's no secret, I'm originally from Chicago, and I had a lot of Indianapolis people say, are you going to move the company to Chicago? And my answer was pretty standard all the time. I said, look, I've been chief operating officer here for 4 years. Before that, I was an executive vice president. So I've been on the executive leadership team for the better part of 10 years. I'd like to think I had a lot of input into what our strategic direction was going to be and how we were going to execute that. And if you think just because I got a new title and I'm moving to the corner office, I'm going to change our strategic direction, you're sadly mistaken. We're going to do exactly what we've been doing and deliver the results that we had. So that made a lot of people feel better. But I think, anytime we all talk about, succession planning and executive succession, but I think when you can do it and it's done right, that transition is just so much smoother in terms of not only the leadership of the company, but the strategic planning and the execution all through the rank and file. So you don't upset the apple cart, and it's more of the same and continued strong performance.
Well, all kidding aside, a brilliant strategy and obviously well executed. So kudos to you and the leadership team for sure. On the subject of leadership, Jim, as Peter and I have done these interviews, the whole issue of culture has come up repeatedly as a key element in driving business success. Tell us a little bit about how that's been the case at Duke, and if you would, describe the culture of the business today.
Yeah, I would tell you the key component of our culture has always been teamwork. And that can be an overused phrase in a lot of situations, but I would tell you it is the cornerstone around our company. We don't have lone rangers that go out and find deals and get things done. We have an expression, we hunt as a pack, right? There's a great Rudyard Kipling quote, the strength of the wolf is the pack and the strength of the pack is the wolf, something like that. But we did an internal analysis on a most simple deal, which is a renewal deal for an existing tenant. And 20 different people, actually it was over 20 different people, had to touch the ball, so to speak, right? Were involved in that deal, in approving it, getting it done, and everything else. So if you think about that, if you can't excel in a team environment, you're not going to do well at Duke Realty. To the point of where, it's not written in stone, but we like men and women who have been involved in team sports. who have been involved in group activities, even in some instances who come from large families because they understand, how to control and, get their message across and convey the message and get everybody on the same page. So that's what's really important. So I would tell you, and it comes home to roost today because, we've all been working remotely for virtually 15 months. And I fight this balance virtually every week of this. I have this desire to get people back in the office, to get that teamwork, that communication, that cooperation back going. And we've done very well through the pandemic. So I can't complain about that. But, I have to be careful about, the health and safety of all of our people. So our offices have been open for a number of months now, and we're getting people back in. We're about probably 50%. We're going to bring people back in later this summer and fall. But I think it's very important to get people back, get people together. Ours is not an industry where you can sit at home on your computer and with your headphones and, type. Ours is one where you got to solve problems and meet challenges, and you do that best when you're together.
Mm-hmm.
So, again, the sector has had an extraordinary degree of strength. The enemy historically of any sector that has great strength for a prolonged period of time is oversupply, getting out over the one's skis, whether it's as an entity or an industry. How do you think about that as a risk, managing that risk? And yet there seems to be a lot of tailwinds. So how do you balance off that thought process?
Well, you watch both sides very closely. I will tell you that today there are a lot more tailwinds than there are risks or opportunities of overbuilding. And your observation is absolutely correct. Every downturn or demise of a cycle in the industrial sector, the primary leading every time is overbuilding, right? And it's a factor of our buildings on a per square foot basis aren't that expensive to build. They're getting more expensive, but relative to malls and office buildings, they're a modest investment. They take 8-9 months to build. So, a lot of people will tell you can throw one up in no time at all. So those are the types of things that lead to overbuilding. In this cycle, and this has been consistent throughout, you've had a great deal of discipline from the lenders. So normally at this time in the cycle, the lenders would be up to 90% of value. And of course, 90% of value is 100% of cost. So developers have no skin in the game, so let's just go do another one and another one and another one. Lenders have been very disciplined, 65% of hard costs, which means that most developers need real equity to do deals. And the private equity industry is very disciplined. They believe in a return of their equity and a return on their equity before they're going to double down and go again. So that component. The other thing, and this is more recent, the last 3 years, land prices, the ability to entitle land has gotten much tougher, much more expensive, longer process, and of late, construction costs. We've seen our steel prices are up 150% since January. Delivery times have gone, they're now more than double. I mean, we're looking out 48, 50 weeks to get steel delivery. So those contributing factors are really holding down the supply. Now, that's the supply that will deliver later this year or next year. The supply this year has really been kept in check by the fact that very few people did any speculative development during the second, third quarter of last year. So we've got this great opportunity where e-commerce is continuing to grow. You've got more onshoring or reshoring of manufacturing and assembly. That's creating more need for distribution within the United States. You've got international challenges. While the Suez Canal incident didn't really affect U.S. logistics, there's an article just in today's Wall Street Journal about 40 container ships sitting outside the port of L.A. Long Beach. All of these things lead to big retailers, big e-commerce companies, big distributors of product in the U.S. needing more space in the U.S. Most of them used to operate on a 15-day inventory. Now they're looking at 30 to 45 days. And so when you think about the users of our space, whether it's Amazon or Walmart or Target or Home Depot, you're not talking about an extra 100,000 square feet. You're talking about an extra 500 million square feet. Well, that's 2 years of absorption. So a lot of tailwind, a lot of pressure to keep supply very, very much in balance. So the market looks very favorable for us for the next few years.
So Jim, back to leadership for a minute. You've been CEO now for 5 years. If somebody was to ask you the greatest leadership lesson you've learned since you've been CEO, what would you say?
Like everybody that sits in this position or yourselves, over the years you develop a handful of things that lessons that you default to. Some you learned the hard way. Some you got great advice at counsel. I would tell you my number one, and I've got 8 of them, and I actually keep a short list of them in a little in the drawer on my desk, and I take them out when I'm doing management talks with up-and-coming leaders in our company, or I'm down at Roosevelt University or the University of Indiana talking to young college kids. But I would tell you the number one that I always default to is you got to love what you do and who you do it with. Now, a lot of young people want to go out and make money. And my answer is, look, you can make money doing a lot of different things. This is a hard business. It's very tough. It's very competitive. You can make a ton of money at it, but you need to make sure that you find the right place and do the things that you do. If you want to be in the retail business, be in the retail business. Don't be in the industrial business. If you don't want to lease space and be a deal person, be an asset manager, be in the treasury group, whatever the case may be. If you don't want to work for a big company, you want to be a sole practitioner, all of those options are available. Do what you want to do. And more importantly, in a company like ours, which is a big company, do it with people you like, people you trust, people that create the right environment, in your operation. And, a lot of young leaders get promoted into positions and they inherit people, right? And they're like, well, I don't want to get rid of Bill or Susie or whoever because they've been here a long time. You know what? You're the leader. You're in charge. That they're your team. And if you don't trust them, you don't like working with them, because we work a lot of days and a lot of nights, you need to make changes. You need to build your own team, because it is your team and you will be held accountable for what the team does. As you know, the board doesn't care, if I don't like somebody or I don't trust somebody. The board says, you didn't make your numbers last quarter, we're in trouble.
Mm-hmm.
So, Jim, I don't recall if your parents are alive, but I think you saw when you were watching the John Gray,
Mm-hmm.
one of my favorite questions is, if I told you I have your parents on the phone, either with a landline or a non-landline, as the case may be, what do you think they would say that you do that makes them proudest?
Well, first of all, both my parents are alive and well. They're 87 years old, residing in Tucson, Arizona. I would tell you realistically, it wouldn't be anything I did in the business world. It would be my family. My parents have been married 65, probably 67 years, something like that. My wife and I will celebrate our 40th wedding.
You're supposed to know that answer before the next anniversary.
Well, I know mine. My 40th wedding anniversary is this summer. I've got 3 great kids, who are all doing well in their own right. I've got, 2 daughter-in-laws. I've got a great granddaughter. Look, we all want, successful careers, and we all want to make a lot of money, but that's what I'm leaving behind. And that's what I think they would be most proud of. Not how much money I made and whether I was a CEO for 5 years or 2 years or 10 years.
Jim, it's interesting because of all the people that we've interviewed so far, that Peter and I have interviewed, that has been a consistent answer. And I think for a lot of the people who watch these podcasts, it's somewhat surprising. I don't think they anticipate it, but it's a meaningful statement for sure. So good for you. Jim, another question, a little different than Peter's, but along the same lines. Tell us about the person who was your greatest mentor and what you learned.
So I'm going to cop out, but I'm going to explain it when I cop out. And my greatest mentor was my father. But I qualify that by my dad was an industrial real estate developer in Chicago when I grew up. So since the age of when I could remember, I heard about build-to-suits and land and, warehouses and truck docks. And, when I became old enough to drive and go to work, I spent summers, doing construction and sweeping warehouses. I drive our acquisitions guys around the Chicago market, and I point to buildings that I built and who we built them for. You better check the floor in this building because I don't think we were paying really good attention that day. So, he was a great influence, and the acorn didn't fall very far from the tree. But the other thing that he did, and I'll throw out a couple of names, was he introduced me or pointed me in the right direction to some people, that were very successful in our business. And because there was that personal connection, they were kind enough to give me time, give me their expertise, and give me their, experience. And, guys like Jerry Egan and Vern Schultz, who are both still around in Chicago, great guys who have accomplished great things, many deals, were kind enough when I was a stupid 22-year-old kid to point me in the right direction and help me out and, ask good questions and challenge me on answers and give me the motivation that I needed. So that's really it. It was a direct result of my father, but it was connections that he had and, learning how to network. I can remember when I was a young broker and going to, whether it was SIOR events or things like that and watching him network and, not sit at the same table talking to the same three people, but learning how to work the room. And there's an art to it.
There is an art.
Yeah.
There is an art. So behind Bill's head is integrity and generosity. Right. And one of I think for all of us, philanthropy of time and energy and spirit and monetary is an important thing. What is your view of philanthropy as it relates to you and your family and the company and what are the values that are driving it? What do you try to achieve?
Well, I learned at an early lesson, I guess, or heard this, that, anybody that reaches any degree of success has an obligation to give back. And give back can mean a lot of things. And when we're successful, hopefully you're using your financial wealth to do good things, to, support charitable organizations. But I think it goes beyond that. And it's giving of your time and your expertise. I think my wife is the best recruiter for Duke Realty because she talks to more young people and said, "Oh, call my husband. He'll give you some help. He'll point you in the right direction. He'll introduce you to people." But I got that benefit as I just mentioned, and I feel I have an obligation to give back to young people and introduce them to the right people and point them in the right direction and set their expectations. I do a lot of work with the Marshall Bennett Institute down at Roosevelt University. I've been on the board there, and now I'm on the board of trustees for the university. But I try and go down to Roosevelt at least once a year. And sometimes I teach a class, and sometimes I just talk. And I'm still amazed at how many young professionals that are in school, either undergraduate or graduate, who still think of commercial real estate as wearing a gold jacket and selling houses. And I point to the Chicago skyline and I was like, how do you think all this got done? You don't just have to be a developer or an owner, whether you're an asset manager, an architect, an engineer, a lawyer, there's great opportunity in this industry. And that's one of the things I think our industry needs to do a better job is promoting itself, not only at the top schools, but state schools and small private institutions that, real estate is a great opportunity. and not just in New York on Wall Street working for John Gray at Blackstone. There's a lot of very successful companies doing a lot of good all over the country. And, why not get into the real estate business?
Yeah, it's interesting, Jim. The person that we interviewed just before you is Gene Cohn of Cohn Peterson Fox, the great architectural firm. And you can make contributions in a lot of different ways, no doubt about it. So last question. Let's assume you've got the company's next generation of leadership around a table, and you want to impart your most important words of wisdom as they look at some point in time and taking over for you. What would you share with them?
There's a great line from was a play and then a movie called Glengarry Glen Ross, which I'm sure both of you have seen, where one salesman is talking to another over coffee and he says, always be closing. And the expression we use around here is always be competing, right? We actually shorten it's always be competing. And the reason is you can't rest on your laurels, right? You can't expect things to continue to go as they have. We've had a great run, but you can't expect that to last forever. And you got to be prepared. And if you're doing something the same way you were doing it 10 years ago, then it's probably time to start thinking about changing it and figuring out how to do it better.
Mm-hmm.
Well, Jim, it's a great pleasure. We learned, it's amazing to learn how your father kind of was one of that generation of guys.
Oh, yeah.
Just behind Marshall, actually, right, in that industrial space.
He
Marshall Bennett for those.
Marshall and Lou and
so your father was just kind of a half a step behind that generation, I guess. And I didn't know that. That was an amazing thing to hear. But we certainly appreciate your time and your insights. And Bill, I'll let you take it home from here.
Well, Jim, thanks very much. This has been terrific. You are not only thoughtful, but heartfelt. And that says a lot about who you are as a leader. So thanks for sharing. And we're excited to have you as a member of the series and look forward to obviously catching up soon. So thanks again.
It's been my pleasure. Thank you, too.